Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me today I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, pretty good, especially after this morning. So
Yeah,
keen to get into it.
fantastic result this morning. We'll start with the Middlesbrough game, which was slightly disappointing in the sense that we got a draw when we were expecting to perhaps come away with a win against the side in the bottom three. Bowen with two goals, which was fantastic to see, but only taking away 1 point was slightly disappointing. How did you find that game?
Um, yeah, it was disappointing overall to have only come away with a point. But if you watched, like if you, I guess after that first half an hour or so, you probably would be happy to have ended up with a point. Middlesbrough seemed to be all over us to start the game, and they had it over us. And if I suspect if Johnson hadn't got himself sent
Mm.
off, it could have been a very different game. I mean, it was a hell of a tackle that he
It,
attempted.
it was amazing the fact that he challenged the sending off after he'd been brandished the red card, considering the fact that, as you say, it was such a high tackle, it was such a clear red card. Just sort of to challenge that challenge in that sense, it was pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I think I mean, don't need to talk too much about the tackle itself, but you start like putting in all those different factors that the refs take into consideration. You're going, okay, studs are up.
Mm.
Additionally, they're hot. That leading boot was quite high. I think it hit Lehigh in the knee.
Yeah.
Um, you talk it's directly at the player. There's no angle or anything where you could, maybe it was unlucky to have made contact. Like he's dead on with the player. He was not actually in a position where he's really ever going to win that ball. Like
Yeah.
it was reckless and dangerous. And I'd probably be surprised if he gets the minimum sanction for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was great to see that we responded in that second half and we were actually able to come back and get the draw. I think Bowen's first goal's now been credited to Eves, which is, I mean, it is what it is. But it was a great strike from Bowen regardless. Um, Great to see that he's in such fantastic form, particularly from that game against Middlesbrough, that he was able to get those two goals, get us back into that game. That we'll talk about the Preston game in a second, but he's really sort of that player that is dragging us across the line, getting us those results in those games where we would otherwise perhaps be struggling to get a result.
Yeah, I think we have, I guess, over the last couple of seasons, been lucky enough to watch him really blossom into a not only from a fledgling player into a solid player, but now he's moving from to that next level, from being a
Mm.
solid player to being a legitimate match winner, performing at a very high level consistently. And I mean, luckily enough, at the moment, we're in a very strong position leading into the second half of the season. But if God forbid, we do not get promoted this year,
Mm.
I suspect that there'll be a few clubs up in the Premier League who will be come calling. I mean, we've already had a couple of overtures from a few and some rumours about January swoops and things. But I guess from the line that we saw, hopefully at the beginning of the year, that the Allams took and the stance they took in regard to some of those our better players, that hopefully they can maintain that stance. And we'll keep our players, retain them for the second half of the year, because that's going to give us, the best position to get back in the Premier League. But I've been thinking about, because it was how, for whatever reason, we seem to be a club that seems to perform really well when we have all these international breaks. It seems to be every year
Yeah.
we there's international breaks, and some teams are, they lose that consistency, they lose their form, but we seem to, just in these little pockets between these international breaks, seem to be able to function really well. And we're about the same time now as we were last year, where then we went on that big run, and again we're starting to pick up, build some form heading into this Christmas and festive period, which is always a really hard time And if we can pick up a few more some crucial wins, we're so close to that top six at the moment. If we can get ourselves in there, with a couple of wins in our next few games, and be there at Christmas time, I think we're going to put ourselves in a beautiful position heading into the second half of the season.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, and it's actually a good point to transition into that Preston game. The fantastic 4-0 win this morning has really put us in a fantastic position where I think we're 6 points off third, which is Fulham. Um, it's quite remarkable to consider the fact that at the start of the season, I suspect the aim was basically just to survive, to stay up. Um, that we can now look up at the table, look at those top six positions, look at even third really, and say, well, look, our next two games are against Barnsley and Stoke. Theoretically, 6 points there for the taking, and to be only 6 points behind third is a pretty remarkable position to be in. Where are your ambitions at for the season? Where are you seeing us? Is it a target of, look, top half is achievable and sort of what we should be aiming for? Is it a, top six position is what we should be aiming for? Anything less is disappointing. Is it, look, really top two is what we should be aiming for, and top six is sort of a um, you know, um, position that, if we can't make the top two, then top six will be acceptable.
I think. Look, I think I'd probably if we made top six, it's you can't not count that as a
Yeah.
successful season. I think there's absolutely a potential, like the possibility that if we could maintain a run of form similar to last season, that we could be pushing
Oh,
for those
absolutely. Yeah.
automatic spots. But I think we are.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
it's crazy to think. I mean,
at,
last season, our run started so much later than it did this season that
mm,
we came so close to those playoff spots before. I think it was that draw with Villa, where that sort of really derailed the season. But um, we've started that run so much earlier this season that push for a playoff spot's so much more likely.
Yeah, and that's what I was actually just about to say was
Yeah.
that like last year we went from around around this time we were still down in that sort of 18th, 19th, 20th sort of position and just sort of starting to build some moves in the right direction. And it wasn't until late in the season that we were right on the cusp of that top six. Well, we're here midway through the season, and we're not even at the halfway point of the season yet, and we're 5 points off the top six or something like that.
Mm.
Was it 4 points? 4 points off Swansea in sixth. So I think I think um, the squad that McCann has assembled and the way that they're playing, they probably have. It's probably surprised me a little bit in how well they have come along. I thought I could see what he was trying to do, and I could see that it would be successful in the future. I just didn't know how. That I was surprised with how quickly that has all come together. Um, I guess I'm probably overall I get a bit disappointed in Eves. I
Mm.
thought by now he'd have had a few more goals. And McGuinness seems to be able to get some goals, but I feel like he's just another. He's one bad tackle again away from sitting out for 6 or 8 weeks next time. Like
Yeah, yeah. No,
he just
absolutely.
has me worried.
Yeah, I mean, you have to give him the credit for it was a great penalty this morning. Put it away very well against Preston. But I think there was a tackle, I think it was in the first half from McGuinness, where I think it was just a free kick. It wasn't a yellow card or anything like that. But you look at it and you kind of go, well, if you'd gone in a bit more solidly, that then raises the question for the ref. And he does seem that sort of player where, as you say, he's a tackle away from a lengthy suspension at this point because he's now had two straight red cards. He's a concerning factor for the side. Eves as well, I agree. I mean, he's been a concerning factor in the sense that it was a fantastic win this morning against Preston 4-0, can't be argued with. But the fact that Eves then came on in the second half and wasn't able to add to the score, I think he had a great chance where he just pushed it a little bit wide. Um, he, he's one of those players where you really want him to succeed. He's a really charismatic player. He's a really fantastic sort of player where you think he's probably a fantastic guy to have around the training ground. He just can't put the ball in the net, and for a striker, that's really what you want to see. And look, it's fantastic that Bowen and Grzycki are sort of continuing with their form. Grzycki's put one away, which sort of banished a few demons. That he's had a few games where he hasn't scored a goal. Bowen's now got 4 goals in 2 games, which is a ridiculous form for a winger.
Yeah, and
Um,
he's 12 in 18 for the season.
12 and 18, I mean, it's just fantastic. I think there's a few debates. I think it's still undecided whether that first goal against Middlesbrough was Bowen's goal or Eves' goal. I think the BBC's now credited it as Eves' goal, so Eves now is on 3 for the season, but Bowen, obviously with the 2 this morning, does push him to 50 goals in all competitions for the club, um, which is a ridiculous return as a winger. It's just remarkable that he has that many goals from a wide position, but it leaves us sort of thinking, look, we've got Bowen on one wing, Grzycki on another, but we've got no one up front who is really returning any significant goals for the club. Um, and it leaves the question open for what do we do in January? Do we make a move for a striker in January?
Um, I think um, I think it would be hard to not to make if there was someone available. Um, I'd say that we probably will. We don't tend to do a lot of business in
Mm.
January, but we seem to always do something. Um, and I'd say that at the moment, seems to be our biggest downfall is that number nine, that striker who's able to actually bang in the goals. And we had Campbell who was able to get what he got about 10 or 11 or something last
Yeah.
season. um, you know and that's what you need, that number nine to be getting double figures as well, to just take that little bit of pressure off. I mean, Bowen seems to be thriving with that pressure on his shoulders at the moment, but again, like, we're all sort of one bad tackle on Bowen away from maybe potentially being without goals for being forthcoming.
Oh,
Um,
100%. I mean, there was an incident in I think it was the first half of today's game where Bowen slid in for a challenge, and I think it was Burnsy who sort of raised the comment that it was very concerning because he sort of slid in for the challenge and looked a bit proppy afterwards, and thankfully he was okay afterwards. But um, you know, you sort of think, and it's that fear in the back of the mind, as you say, that one challenge or one tackle or, a misstep, that if Bowen were to pick up a serious injury, we're really left with not many goal scoring options. And, credit to McGann that the formation today really worked quite well with Grzycki on the left and Bauer on the right, with Bowen almost in a free roll through the centre. But Bowen really is sort of our most prolific goal scoring option, and if he were to pick up an injury, it really doesn't leave us with a whole lot of options on the park.
no, it is that's a little bit concerning, but I think overall, to have Preston at the KCOM and to come away with a 4-0 win,
Mm.
seemed like it was a fairly comprehensive victory, that it puts in a good platform, leading into the weekend and the coming games.
Yeah, so what do you make of that game overall? I mean, Preston coming into that game before this game week started, they were coming in third on the table. They slipped to fourth after I think it was Fulham who got the victory on Wednesday morning our time. But coming into the Thursday morning, I think Preston were fourth on the table. To come away with a 4-0 win, what sort of statement do you think that makes for the competition and for our confidence to come away with a 4-0 win against a team that was in the playoffs? I think we've basically got the best record against the top six in the entire championship. Um, and then with Barnsley coming up on the weekend, it surely fills us with a lot of confidence about our potential and where we could end up this season.
Yeah, I think anytime you put 4 goals past another team, it's always a statement or a marker of some kind, and it's always even uh, better when it's against one of the top teams in the division. One thing I think when I was watching the highlights of the Preston game, I was on Preston's YouTube actually, and their uh, caller said that I think the BBC had said somewhere recently that we are the best counter-attacking,
Mm,
or we have the best counter-attack or the best counter-attacking team in the championship or whatever. I can't remember whether it's just championship or in England, but that's a pretty serious rap for a
yeah.
team that was top half, but not in the top 10 coming into the weekend, into the game, sort of thing. Like you just and now we're sort of 4 points off. We've got heaps of plenty of football left to play this season. I think we needed to actually push away from that. Once it got to 1 or 2 goals this morning, I thought, oh, let's just keep going. We've got heaps of time, and they did. They got a couple more, so I think we've put ourselves in a really good position. We're going to be high on confidence, especially after knocking off a team that is knocking on the door of those automatic promotion spots themselves. Um, I see. I'll be disappointed if, as you say, with Barnsley and Stoke, if they're our next games, then be disappointed not to take 6 points from them. And then in 2 games' time, I expect we should probably be just inside, maybe in sixth, depending on results. But we're going to be right on the cusp either way if we can get those points.
So before we move on to discussing the Barnsley game in a bit more detail, I'll give you a trivia question which we'll come back to answer after talking about Barnsley. Um, I want to know, and our listeners can try and have a think about this as well, who our top five scorers for the decade are. Obviously, we've sort of talked about Bowen hitting 50 goals this morning, so he's obviously first on that list. But there's four other players which I'll see if you can think of who they are. I mean, a couple of those you might know as an obvious answer, but a couple of those are actually quite surprising. So I'll see if you can think of those in a bit. But we'll move on and first talk about the Barnsley game coming up, which, uh, look, I think looking at the Middlesbrough game, I think the Middlesbrough game perfectly emphasizes why this Barnsley game can't be taken for granted. I look at the Barnsley game and I think, look, yes, it should be 3 points. It's that, a team coming last on the table, really struggling for form. They've just lost to Middlesbrough this morning, in fact, but um, as a as a Hull City supporter, you can never really take a game for granted. Case in point, perfectly being the Middlesbrough game just last weekend, where we drew the game. Um, the Barnsley game coming up, I really think if we can take the 3 points, it really should give us a bit of a gap to the bottom half of the table and really give us a chance at pushing into that top six of the division. Um, but look, it's always concerning. A team down on confidence, down on luck. You never really know how we're going to perform, whether the side's going to be a bit complacent, how it's going to perform. So how do you see this game coming up, and how do you see us performing?
Um, Look, I think I don't. I'm not going to say that we're going to do it comfortably, but I can. I feel confident enough, and I feel like the players are going to be confident enough. And I think McCann. I think we've already had a couple of banana skin moments this season, and I
Mm,
think McCann will have them, primed and ready to go, and not taking the game for granted, not worrying about Barnsley's position on the table, just reinforcing the fact that these competitions, these leagues in England are the toughest leagues, around the most even leagues around. So I think I think they'll be up for it. I don't feel like they're going to take anything for granted, and I'm feeling pretty confident about that we might go on a little run of form similar to what we did last year. Getting that sort of vibe, to be honest.
it was interesting that pre-season Malik Wilks had a choice between us and Barnsley, supposedly, reportedly, according to the papers, and ended up choosing Barnsley, a winger who theoretically would have replaced either Bowen or Grzycki in the side. Do you think there's any sort of grudge or uh, extra motivation to beat Barnsley because of the fact that a player chose to go to Barnsley over us? Or do you sort of think it's just sort of, the way it is, players choose to go where they go, where they choose to go, and we'll just kind of carry on as it is?
Look, I think I would expect that the club as a whole and the players individually would understand that every player's got to make a decision based on what they feel is the best choice for them. And I feel like in a career in a career in football, you only get so many choices. And if people are I really don't feel like there's much need to hold a grudge
Mm.
over transfer activity. Even like in regards to like you're talking about derbies and stuff like that, and moving to rivals, I it really doesn't. I see people get really upset about it, and but I just think th- for what there's got to be a reason that appealed to that player, and it's not necessarily it's never really. I don't think it often is a slight, supposed to be a slight on the club. It's not that Hull City wasn't an attractive proposition. It's just that Barnsley offered something that appealed more to Wilkes. So I feel like I don't personally think there should be any hard feelings there or no grudge about that decision. Because I think they're the sort of pitfalls that you'll find, like that are going to you get sucked into, making poor decisions in the game and worrying about these small things that have no impact really on how the game should play out.
Yeah, fair enough. Do you have a score prediction for this one coming up? Personally, I think looking at this game, I mean, it's an away fixture. Barnsley haven't picked up a whole lot of points in the league. I really think it should be sort of a 2-0, 3-0 sort of comprehensive victory. How do you see it?
Um, for whatever reason, I'm feeling a 2-1 victory.
Okay.
I've just don't know, just with watching I watched the highlights of the last couple of games and the goals that Long has been conceded. He seems to have been uh, caught out of position a little bit on a couple of them, and I think Preston hit the post twice this
Yeah, they
morning.
did. Yep,
And
yep.
and Long was a fair way away from actually those from those balls when they hit the post. So it's got me a little bit a little bit concerned, but I think overall they're defending pretty well, and I can't see them conceding a heap of goals, but I think there might be one there for Barnsley.
Fair enough. Well, before we go into our trivia answer, we'll look back at our football flashback of the week, which was a pretty significant fixture 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, in fact, I think. Um, 6 years ago, pretty much to the day. I think it's for this coming weekend. Defeating Liverpool 3-1 at home in the Premier League was personally my first victory in person watching City. His first goals scored by City, and our first ever win over Liverpool in a competitive fixture. Um, it's funny actually looking back on that season as a whole. City winning the title, I think it was that season, and Liverpool not winning the title. Liverpool losing this fixture to City. I think Liverpool losing to City was in fact their worst defeat of the season when you look at where every side finished that season. So, in some cases, you could argue that perhaps that loss cost them the title. You look at the Chelsea slip, the Crystal Palace draw. There's other fixtures that people sort of fixate on as costing Liverpool the title. But we, of course, finished lowest of those sides, so you can kind of say maybe we were the defeat that cost Liverpool the title. Um, it was a fantastic win for us under Bruce. It was, I think, Bruce's first win against Liverpool as a manager. Livermore scored the opening goal. It was Myler who scored the goal to put us ahead after Gerrard's equaliser, and then Huddleston had a shot that was eventually credited as a Skirtle own goal, I think it was, which didn't give him the chance to cut his hair after that fixture. I think it was later the Fulham fixture that did that. But it was a fantastic 3-1 win. First season up in the Premier League under Bruce. How did you find that fixture? What are your memories of that fixture?
I was just looking at this now, and I go, oh, that's just after I actually started taking a real interest in City, and that's the season that I started actually following them properly. Um, and then trying to think back specifically to this game, it might be one that I didn't. Don't know if maybe I didn't watch it. I can't remember. I don't actually remember a lot about this game, which is disappointing. When you said Liverpool when we beat Liverpool, I thought of only a couple of years ago. But no.
We've
Uh,
really got a since that game that really, that put a marker down for our performances against Liverpool at home, because it was that game. Then there was the 1-0 win where Dawson scored the winner the following season. And then it was under Silver, I think, where we got a 2-0 win when Nias and
yes.
Ranocchia scored. So we really sort of set a marker for home performances against Liverpool from that game.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. I'm just reading through a review of that game, and it's just the things it's just after the attempt to rebrand
Yeah,
City
it
to
was
Hull
really. It was a couple of
Tigers,
weeks.
and
Yeah.
had claimed that anyone who opposed it could die as soon as they
Yeah,
wanted.
yeah, yeah.
This seems like it's really the start of all of our lovely problems that we've had with the Allens over this time. But I'm just looking at some of the names that are involved, you're talking about Luis Suarez and
Mm.
Sterling and Victor Moses.
What I
Um,
find most amazing about that game is everyone looks back on Suarez's career at Liverpool was such a fantastic game. I remember that game because I remember traveling up on a train to Hull, and everyone sort of saying, I think Sturridge was injured for that game, so they put so I think Flanagan was starting at right back, and he was sort of seen as a nobody. I think Sterling started that game, and he was also at that stage not a huge player for Liverpool, and he was sort of poo-pooed by Liverpool supporters. But Suarez starting up top was, you know, he was such a fantastic player for Liverpool, and you look at what he accomplished with Liverpool and what he went on to accomplish and still is accomplishing with Barcelona. And you look at the performance that Alex Bruce put in, and Alex Bruce is sort of seen as this such a layman's or a workman-like defender. Um, I mean, sort of. I have to compare it in a sense to the old Sydney Swans side where you had your Leo Barrys and so ons, where everyone sort of looks at them and says, "Oh, look, they're such a layman, they're such a nobody who is such an average player who can't do a whole lot more than just start a game and be expected to maybe do a little bit. But Alex Bruce was absolutely vital in kicking and hitting Suarez out of that game. Where I've watched that game a couple of times now, and there's a couple of tackles where Alex Bruce just completely clobbers Suarez, and clean tackles, fantastic tackles that are by the book, but just completely put Suarez out of the game. And um, the only goal that Liverpool scored was a Jarrod free kick from it was a Curtis Davies foul on I can't remember who it was, but it was a very fortunate sort of free kick that they scored from, and we all sort of know McGregor's iffy defending from set pieces, but by and large in that game we were just fantastic defensively. When you look at the players that Liverpool had in attack in that game, it was just a fantastic defensive effort, and then to score 3 goals.
Yeah, I think like what you said about Alex Bruce, like I think that just really highlights how funny football can
Yeah.
be. I mean, even you look at just with the Champions League and things that have been happening, and you look at um, Australia's Milos Dejanek at
Yeah.
Red Star Belgrade, and they perform really well in the Champions League, and they probably realistically don't have a right to perform as well there as well as they do. And just like I don't know, football's just a funny game, and sometimes those players. that a club will just hold on to, and you go, why do we still have like a guy like why is there a guy like this here? Like we could have so many better, defenders or attackers or wingers or whatever. Um, but I guess like that's and then they slowly build a
Yeah.
cult following. It's a crazy thing because he had a few. It wasn't just that game. There's a couple of other games where he came in and did just an immense job without ever being able to force himself into a regular starting position. But whenever he came in, he was always able to do a job. I don't really remember many games where you go, oh God, Alex, like why is he here? He
And
always seemed to perform.
And I think the most unfortunate thing for Bruce was his last name. I think when you look at the performances that he put in, he was one of our best defenders. And if his last name was Smith, you know, pun not intended with your last name, but if his last name was Smith, I think the perception of him would be so much higher than it was. But the fact that he was the manager's son, I think really, really meant that people looked at him so much more critically than they should have. I think he was an absolutely fantastic player for City. And really, when we were relegated after that following season, I really think, well, he was still sort of in and out of the side from memory, but. Um, I don't think he should have been released when he was. I think he's one of those players when I look at City sides over the last 10 years or so, and you think players that were let go. So, for instance, Rosenior. Rosenior is another one who's a perfect example where you look at them and you say, well, they were such fantastic servants for the club, and you could just tell that they just bled amber and black, and they really loved the club, and they were such fantastic players for the club when they were selected that you really feel it was so unfortunate when they were let go because they had so much to give, and I think the value that they added to the side was not equal to either the transfer fees in particular cases. So, for instance, Chester going to I think it was Norwich at the time, or maybe it was West Brom. I think it was West Brom. It was, transfer fees were not equal to the actual value that they gave to the side in terms of the blood, sweat, and tears that they contributed. Um, that when they were let go, we weren't able to replace them with equal sort of players. And particularly in Bruce's case, he was a free transfer, so I guess theoretically he was replaced by uh, Chelsea player whose name's escaped me, who's now at Sheffield Wednesday. I will look that up whilst you respond.
Um, Mind blank. Um, cool. Yeah. Yeah. I think in terms of players, being let go. I mean, we've gone on a bit of a tangent here, but in terms of yeah, I think I feel like in the modern day, unless like a player is absolutely rubbish and they offer nothing to your team, letting them go on a free transfer seems like such like a absolute like like a really poor decision making. You just like it's just letting like because we a football club's a business and the players the assets and you're letting assets walk out the door
Yeah,
and for nothing. It seems really weird, particularly when you look at I mean, the I guess the alternative is it might backfire, like what it looks like is going to happen with Henriksen, where you just go, oh, we'll give you 1 year, we'll activate your 1 year extension, we'll sell you next year, to try and recoup some money, and then not sell them. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, I don't know, it's a weird one, but I think you're right in terms of the uh, letting some of those players go, those and like big figures within the club, letting them go and then not being able to adequately replace,
Michael
whether it
Hector,
is
by the way, is the player I was thinking of.
Hector. Yeah,
Yes.
he's been around a bit, uh, been in a few clubs. Yeah, and not being able to replace them with the same, whether it's personality or whether it's experience or whatever it is. But yeah, I think I guess that's true of all transfer wheelings and dealings that letting someone go and bringing in a replacement, you're trying to to keep things as stable as possible. But there's always something that is lost and gained, I suppose, in the process, due to everyone's individuality. But um,
Yeah, yeah, no, fair enough. Before I get a score prediction from you for the Barnsley game, do you have a guesstimate or an idea for who potentially could be our top five goal scorers for this decade? And if not, I will give you the answer.
um, I'm gonna hazard a guess. Is Jarrod Bowen on the list?
Well, look, I think that's a shocking guess, but yes, he is in fact top of the list with jury's still out, but we'll say 50 goals in all competitions for the club. Well, I think
Right.
with one of the goals against Middlesbrough credited to Tom Eaves is on 50. Yes. Do you have any of the
Um,
others?
I would say Abel Hernandez would be there because he got, what was it, his first season of the championship, he got like 22 goals or something,
Yeah.
I'm
I
sure.
mean, it's actually
So he'd be
surprising.
he'd have to be around 40 goals or something.
Yeah, in fact, he's on 39 goals in all competitions, which in a way sort of surprises me that he's only, what's that, 11 goals behind Bowen. When you think the fact that Bowen's had three really prolific seasons for City,
Mm.
and Hernandez, as you say, he had that one really fantastic season in the championship. But other than that, he had that, I think he got 6 or 7 goals in his first
Yeah,
season in the Premier League, and then maybe he got, 4 or 5 in his second season in the Premier League. He had that season where he was really injured for us under
yeah.
Slutskin and Adkins, but then I think he went kind of nuts at the end of the season. So yes, he did end up with 39 goals for us in all competitions. Do you have any ideas for the other three?
I'm pretty well lost. I was just trying to think. I was like, I feel like at least one of these players, these last players, has to be someone who was there for a long. I
Mm.
feel like there's someone who was there for a long time, and so I'm thinking about guys like Myler and those sorts of guys who were at the club
Okay.
for a very
Yep.
long time. But I can't decide on which ones I want to go. I mean, I'll say David Myler.
You know
I
what?
feel like he didn't score a lot of goals, but he was there for ages. And so even if he only scored like 2 or 3 goals each year, he probably ends up with 15 or 20
Yeah, you
goals.
know what? It's actually really funny because um, taking away goals in other competitions in league goals, David Myler is actually in our top five, which is absolutely ridiculous when you consider the fact that he's I guess essentially a defensive midfielder, a box-to-box midfielder. He scored 19 goals for us in all competitions, which doesn't quite make the top five. I think he's sixth on the list, but. It's a fantastic return for him, and as you say, it sort of highlights the fact that his longevity was really key in that. But you know, it was that first season with us, and then well, really first 2 seasons with us in that championship season, and then even in the Premier League, he he scored some really vital goals for us. But no, doesn't quite make the top five. Um, I'll give you a hint then. I'll give you a hint. One of the other three players is still with us, and the other two players had a very vital role well, sorry, one of the other players had a vital role in our promotion season in 12-13, and then the other had you know, well, I'll say vital role in 12-13 and 13-14. He scored some pretty key goals in 13-14 as well.
Um, oh man, someone who's still with
So
us.
someone is still with us. Just think of players who are still with us who could potentially have been quite prolific over the last few seasons.
Um,
Who is potentially royalty.
oh man, you are doing. I should be way better at these sorts of things, but I cannot
So it is
think.
King Kamil Grzycki, who has
Mm.
22 goals in all competitions for us. Is actually fifth on the list. And then there are two other players. One player who was with us since 2010, so a little bit before your time, but then was actually a captain for us in our first Premier League season. If that gives you any indication of who it might be. Scored a couple of goals in that famous 6-0 win over Fulham. Played for a season in Australia.
Why?
Played for Melbourne City.
Mm,
Oh,
my
name of
my
the.
brain.
So it's Robert Corrin. Robert Corrin had,
Oh,
yep, had 20.
he's mine. His name crossed my mind earlier, and I was like, because I knew he'd been with us, and he was had done some really good stuff at the like earlier in his City career.
So he's one. He's one of those players that he was just. So he was with us from 2010, all through 2010, 2011, 2012, through the promotion up into the Premier League. Was fantastic. Scored 29 goals for us, um, and then obviously was released and went to Australia. Played a great season with Melbourne City. Had a couple of injuries, but still, performed quite well. The final player on the list scored 31 goals for us. Was recruited from Leicester City. Um, I guess in that 12-13 season in the Premier, sorry, 13-14 season in the Premier League was more of a cup player. I'll give you one final chance to think of who it might be, but otherwise I can let you know.
Recruited from Leicester, and as soon as you say the name, I'm going to go. Oh yeah, of course. Um, no, I can't. I just can't think.
So it was Matty Fryatt.
See, and that was another name that went through my
Yeah,
mind when I was trying to think of it, and then I was like, "How am I?" I was like, "He didn't. I swear he didn't play that much
that's
football
the
though."
thing,
But
right?
then,
It's remarkable to think. So before so I guess you think of your Jay Simpsons and so on and McLean Aaron McLean's and so on. So in that period, I guess from 2010 to 2013, even under Bruce, we really didn't have that many goal scoring players. And
mm,
Fryatt really, I think he came in the January window in 2011 and really was our most prolific player through that promotion season. I mean, in a way, I'm almost surprised that someone like a George Boyd isn't in this list because I think George Boyd came in Bruce's recruitment drive in that window in January 13, I think it was, to really push us onto the Premier League. Um, but Fryatt, really, I mean, look, he when he played in the Premier League, when he scored that incredible goal against Manchester City, he scored quite a few fantastic goals in the FA Cup. My one in particular that I remember is the goal against Southend to open the scoring, a game that I was actually at, which was a fantastic goal, and then really set us on our way. He then also scored the goal in the semi-final against Sheffield Wednesday that I think Sagbo scored the first goal, then but Fright put us in the lead, which was fantastic just after half time. And I think he scored a goal against Sunderland as well. So he's really scored a couple of goals that were really vital in all competitions for us. Um, but look, it's remarkable looking at that list and to think that Bowen at 49 or really 50 goals in all competitions is top of that list when he's only played 2.5 seasons for us, not even 2.5 seasons for us. And look, I guess the purpose of this trivia question is to underline just how fantastic Bowen has been. That in 2.5 seasons, he's ahead of all of those players that are really sort of, legendary figures of the last decade for City. And we're in 2019 now, almost at 2020. It's looking back at this entire decade, and Jarrod Bowen's at the top of the list. You look at Abel Hernandez, who um, really sort of fired us to promotion in that 15-16 season, and was really sort of one of our main goal scorers in our 14-15 season. And then, under Marco Silva, I mean, he scored those two fantastic goals against Bournemouth in one of Silva's first games. He was really our main striker in that season. We had our Yelovic's as well, and NDI's as well, but Hernandez was there. Fryatt really under Bruce and previous managers was sort of our main goal scorer at the start of the decade. You look at Corrin as our sort of main goal scoring midfielder. You look at Grzycki as, theoretically, Grzycki's been in the side longer than Bowen. He was playing in the Premier League under Silva and well, really just Silva, and then Championship under Slutsky and other managers. But Grzycki theoretically is no worse than Bowen in terms of appearances and experience, and in a lot of ways really is more experienced than Bowen. But Bowen has just, set the world alight, and it's just, you pinch yourself at the fact that Bowen is still a City player and hasn't moved on.
Yeah, it's sort of it's something we keep coming back to. That I guess we're just. I'm, I'm thankful. I guess it's weird to be thankful for the alums, but the marker that they laid down at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of this season, where they said, we want to make a serious push
Yeah.
for the year. We're not going to sell off these players. Is I mean, I'm very grateful for that. I mean, we're going on a ride this year, and uh, I'm still not really sure how far we're going to go, which is great.
Do you think we can get promoted? As a serious question, when you sort of set everything down, you look rationally at the table, you look at the squads in this division, you look at our squad, you look at what we've achieved over the last couple of years, what we've sort of achieved so far this season. Do you think we can get promoted?
I think I don't know if we have. I don't think we'll reach automatic promotion. I
No.
feel
Okay.
like we're just lacking a little bit, probably in our overall depth, particularly in that forward line, which we sort of touched on,
Mm.
to really challenge for those top two spots. But I see no reason why we can't at least make the playoffs. And once you get to those playoffs, it's sort of it's anyone's game really.
Yeah.
So I think I could see us going on earning promotion through the playoffs. Absolutely. But I think there's so much football still to be played that it's really it's almost anyone's league at this stage.
I think I completely agree. I look at the table and I think, look, we're 6 points off third, I think, or fourth, maybe it is. 6 points off fourth with, the bottom two teams in the division in our next two games. Um, I think we're every chance of finishing in the promotion in the playoff places. Um, Whether we could push on to the top two, I think Jarrod Bowen spoke recently about the fact that, look, there's no standout team this season, and that maybe we could finish in the top two places. I think games like the Middlesbrough game probably um, sort of dampened that enthusiasm for me. I think it sort of highlights the fact that maybe we're not there yet. We're not a automatic team yet, but we're certainly a team that could make the playoffs. And I think while we probably don't have it, we don't have the well, we don't really have any of the players who've experienced playoff football before with us. Um, I think we've got enough players that have that confidence or that ability that on a given day, you look at you look at your Krasicki's, you look at your Bowens, you look at your Irvines even really, and you think, well, on their day, they could really turn it on, perform, and give us a result either at home or away and get us to Wembley, and then who knows what excuse me, who knows what happens at Wembley. Um, Look, it's gonna be it's a fantastic season. I think it's fantastic in the sense that it's a very open season. There's no sides that really stand out as um, clearly, you don't have three sides that are clearly going to go up, which I don't think there's many seasons where that's the case. You look at the top two, I think it's Leeds and West Brom at the moment, but even, Leeds traditionally drop off second half of the season, so you can't really confidently say that they're going to go up. West Brom last season dropped off a little bit, so you can't confidently say that they're going to go up, but I think you could probably say one of those two sides will definitely go up in the automatics. Fulham looking strong, but look, if we keep performing the way that we're going, like you look at the fact that yeah, we beat Fulham 3-0 away from home. We lost 1-0 to Fulham to West Brom, but that was a very close game. We've got Leeds coming up. There's a couple of fixtures where we could really make an impact.
Yeah, I think it's sort of we're sort of just saying the same stuff
Yeah.
again now, but yeah, absolutely. it's an exciting time to be a City supporter, and I think I'm looking forward to the coming games and looking forward to hopefully just continuing to work our way up that table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're both looking forward to the game against Barnsley this weekend. Do you have a score prediction for that one before we head off?
I didn't. Did we not already do that? I think I
Did we do
said
it?
2-1.
2-1? Oh, that's
Yeah,
right.
I'm
You
sure
did
we did.
too. You did too.
I think you
Okay.
said two. You said a 2 or 3-0, and I think I said 2-1 because I thought Long had looked a little bit shaky on a couple of those goals. The goals at Middlesbrough, and then the couple of shots that hit the post
Yeah.
in the morning this morning.
That's it. So hopefully we can get the 3 points against Barnsley. I think if we can get the 3 points against Barnsley, I think we can stop looking down the table. I think there's a bit of a I think there's a logjam from where we are in ninth down to 17th. There's only about a 3 point gap between those sides. I think if we can get those 3 points against Barnsley, it starts to put a bit of a gap between those sides. So fingers crossed we can get that result on the weekend, and then we can look ahead to next week against Stoke. But thank you for joining me, Dan,
No worries.
and thank you everyone for listening in. Until next time, come on, City. You've been listening to the official Hull City Australia podcast. For more discussion, join us on Facebook in the Hull City AFC Australian Supporters Group, or follow us on Twitter at Hull City AFC Oz. The music was created by Amber and Black.
City's on fire. We're going higher and higher. There's no turning back 'cause you're out.